But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian. I'm here with Alison, the Queen Mother of HBR. And this is HBR Debate, where we essentially watch video debates, or sometimes audio debates, I guess, and we just kind of like analyze the arguments made either on behalf of the feminist side of the discussion or on behalf of the men's issues side of the discussion. And today we have a very special treat. This video has been making the rounds, and certainly at least in our circles, right?
Making the rounds.
It's actually it's been going around the bend. It's been traveling the internet ways. I took some kratom a little while ago. Yes, it's right. It's been around. Okay, it's basically the village bicycle, and it's by a YouTube channel called Jubilee. And what Jubilee, they have lots of different things. They're a bit like kind of normie, cringe content. Basically, they're pretty much an SJW website, but like along the lines of, say, BuzzFeed or something. But one thing that Jubilee tries to do in a series is they have this series called I think it's called Middleground, where they bring two sides of a discussion together and they try to get them talking about their beliefs, issues, whatever. And so this one is special because it's entitled Men's Rights versus Feminism, Is Toxic Masculinity Real? Now, they have done some panels in the past where they've had feminists and non-feminists on, but not necessarily panels where they've had feminists and MRAs on. So this is the first, I think it's the first, maybe the second one like that. I think they did one other once, but that was like a while back. So we are going to look at the discussion. I have took the trouble to watch the video and gone through and, did some timestamps so that we can see what's being said and analyze it. There are some spicy moments in the discussion. Before we get into it, though, there's something I want to tell you. This original discussion was about 2 hours and some change long. It was really long. And they broke it down to 24 minutes. So I haven't listened to the whole 2-hour video because one of the people that attended this thing recorded it. But I know that they took out the most constructive parts of the discussion and they left in the stuff that's, the most sort of triggering. So,
it just occurs to me because I believe on Jubilee's website, they say that they're working towards the human good, and certainly taking a 2-hour discussion and reducing it down to its most clickbaity sound bites, shall we say. Its most outrageous sound bites. The sound bites most likely to incite anger and conflict and increase the level of animosity between two groups of people. That is definitely working towards the human good, Jubilee.
Yeah,
I'm really feeling you.
Yeah,
feeling you. Okay, all right.
All right. So let me start with this clip. First off, guys, we started a little bit late because Alison's got a different mic than what she normally uses, and we had to play around with audio levels. On my end, everything sounds pretty good, but I need you guys to let me know if it's really awful. If there's a small change and you're spurging out about it, I can't fix that. But if it's drastic, let me know and I'll make an adjustment. Plus, if you want to chime in, send us a super chat, and I'll certainly read it, when there's a break in between clips. And lastly, hit that like button before we even get started. Maybe somebody else will see it's going on and they'll jump on the train and, be a part of the conversation. So with that said, I'm going to play
Wait. I want to bring something up. YouTube has now established a new standard that channels have to live up to, and that is profitability. So in the past, we've said don't send super chats to this channel. Instead, make your donations directly to us. But now we have to say, if you got them, if you got your super chats, please send them through. Try to not make them too controversial, because the money will then go to YouTube instead of us. But unfortunately, now we actually have to ask you to put super chats through our channel, because we do not get monetized, or we very rarely get monetized by YouTube. And super chats are basically our only income, and it's our only way of proving to YouTube that we should not be axed by YouTube. So if you want to continue to see this content in this particular medium, you do have to send those super chats. I just wanted to point that out.
There you go. All right. So with that said, let's get into it. First, I'm going to play this little intro that sets everything up.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Thank you for tuning in for Middleground, which is all about disagreeing and having a dialogue.
That's right. Make sure you stick around to the end, because we want to discuss more about the ethos of Middleground. But for now, we hope you enjoy.
You said that women are misguided. We are not misguided. We do not need you to shepherd us.
Ooh, see how they open up with that stinger, you know? So you say, "Oh shit, the feminists are mad." But go ahead.
Men misguided? I mean, toxic masculinity is essentially means that men are misguided and need to be controlled by this particular movement.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. You start with the very thing that you are establishing you have a right to do to others. I can see I'm gonna love this.
Oh yeah, no, it's gonna be so educational. So it's setting it up. Middleground, season 6, episode 7, men's rights versus feminism. All right, so I'm gonna jump ahead to I want to show who's in this, but I'm gonna jump ahead because we don't want to spend too much time on this. So here's where they ask.
Well, why don't you tell us who's in this, and we'll take your word for it.
So I don't know their names, but the 3 feminists are pretty much all the same. They're all feminists. One of them is at least based on the way the discussion goes, she seems more along the lines of what you might call an equity feminist. One of them proudly calls herself an intersectional feminist, so, you know, the most cancerous one. And the last one is just, she's also an intersectional feminist, but she's also probably the most emotional and prone to outbursts. So, but they're all basically in line. Now, the MRAs, or at least the people they're calling MRAs, that's the part that's a little bit more interesting. We got 3 men for the MRAs. 2 of them I've never heard of before. One guy named Zach, he's an Asian guy. His focus seems to be, I mean, he's being lumped in with MRM, but he doesn't talk about any men's issues. He talks about wanting to, he seems to be a more along the lines of maybe like a red pillar. Like he wants men to go back to their, re-embrace their masculinity. He wants a return to, you know, a positive masculinity, manhood, right? He thinks that men are being feminized, this kind of thing. I don't personally have a problem with that. He's not like going, he's not saying anything that's too bad. I think that there is, that's sort of in line with my feelings on masculinity in terms of that angle. The second person is this guy, I can't remember his name, Derek, I think, yeah. And he's an incel and an incel advocate. And he is, in terms of his beliefs, he's really traditionalist. He basically just wants things to go back to the way they were in his mind, because he thinks that everybody would be happier, and I think that he believes that it would probably like change his situation as well. And yeah, so that's the incel. So not an MRA, doesn't talk about men's rights, doesn't talk about the legal stuff. And the last person is actually a guy that I've actually had on the show a couple times, Christoff Peckgoz, which you guys may know. He's the Title IX activist. He's in California, originally from Turkey. And he fights for men's issues in the universities and fights against Title IX and all this other stuff. He's actually on this panel, the only real MRA from what I can tell. And he's the only one that actually makes like MRA talking points, MRA arguments, whereas the other two guys, I mean, Zach is, he seems reasonable, so I'm not judging him too harshly, but I feel like Derek was almost brought on to kind of delegitimize the larger arguments. I don't think Derek is a plant, because I've seen him in other places. I think that he is genuinely what he says he is, but I don't think someone who is just an incel is necessarily the best person that you would use to represent the men's rights movement. So,
Well,
what?
Okay, an incel isn't the best person to represent it. It is no representation. He's no representation of the men's rights.
I mean, I think theoretically an incel can also be an MRA, but
yes.
but they would have to have like the arguments and talking points, and the they'd have to have their data, and he's not. He's just a guy who is an incel. He's isolated. He's socially ostracized, and his solutions, or his proposed solutions, they just don't. They don't apply to the kinds of stuff that MRAs usually talk about. So he's doing more harm than good.
First of all, an incel isn't. It's like asking somebody in librarian science to represent feminism. It's not. And I mean, there is some more relation and overlap than necessarily that, but it's just you taking somebody from a completely different field. And the other thing is that if the incel has no consideration or concern for men as a group, as in other men, and a lot of incels, they're like, oh, the chads. So you're not looking at somebody who necessarily has the same sympathies as a men's rights activist, because men's rights activists, especially ones who do this long term, care about men. They don't just care about themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not saying that incels can't just care about themselves, but I don't see anything in that movement that's really about men necessarily as a group. It's just really about
that particular incel. I mean, they even turn on each other when an incel finds someone. So it's not even, and again, it's not even a movement. But okay, so anyway,
so wait. So we have three people.
Mm-hmm.
One person is an incel, so not a men's rights activist, and I've heard that he explicitly says that he's not a men's rights activist.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have another person who has an opinion on the relationship between men and women and men's masculinity. So incel, person with an opinion, and Kursat.
And Kursat Peckgoz, yes, an actual MRA. And you'll see. MRA. Yes, and by the way, guys, I'm gonna have Kursat on the show this Friday to talk about this particular episode of Jubilee that he did. He's actually filed complaints with the YouTube channel, the people who produce it, because he wants them to release the full length discussion, and a lot of people have also sent in letters and emails asking for the full discussion, because again, it's a really skewed version of what we're getting. But anyway, we've belabored this point for too long. Let's find out what people's thoughts are on feminism. So they ask them, what are your thoughts on feminists and feminism?
When you hear the word feminism, what comes to mind?
Marxism?
To me, feminism is fairness.
I think that it's unfortunately misguided.
Feminism is a flawed movement.
When you hear the phrase men's rights, what comes to mind?
Okay, I'm pausing it there. So the guy in the yellow is the incel. The Asian dude with the tight t-shirt, that's the kind of, I don't want to pigeonhole him, but he's kind of a pro-masculinity guy. Not necessarily anti-feminist, but he does know, I think, about men's issues. But it's not like the center of what he advocates. And then there's Kursat, who you saw. Okay. So now they're asking, when you hear the phrase men's rights, what comes to mind? Okay.
Aggression.
Advocating for the human rights of man as a class.
I start laughing.
What do you hope to get from the conversation today?
Okay, I don't think we need to go any further, but did you hear all that?
Yeah, I did hear all that. Now, okay, so is that all of the feminists that the feminists had to say? Well, what's really interesting is the original feminist said feminism is about fairness. And I
Yeah.
don't know if that was the individual who laughed at the idea of men's rights. Now, let's set aside all of the history, all of the drama, all of the established chaos between feminism and men's rights. Men's rights at its core is the recognition that men deserve rights. That is, white men, black men, Latino men,
Gay
trans
men,
gay men, bisexual men,
Muslim men, Christian men,
Muslim
atheist men.
Christian men, atheist men. Whatever qualifier you put in front of men, men's rights is about recognizing that they deserve rights and that they have issues as a group, vulnerabilities as a group.
Yeah.
The fact that they're saying feminism is about fairness and they're laughing at the very idea that men deserve rights. I guess I'm just sort of astounded by that.
Yeah.
But not really, because I'm used to it.
It's also, no, I hear what you're saying. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting takes that the feminist women engage in where they're not aware of what they just said about MRAs right after talking about their own movement. Like, it's actually quite astonishing. Plus, I just want to point out that even if you can't sense, because you have to I think that you might be able to see the hostility that these feminists have for these MRAs right off the bat by the questioning.
MRA.
Yeah.
MRA.
Yeah, the MRA and the two MRA adjacent guys, I guess. By the way that they answered their questions. So when the men were asked about feminism, the most hostile response came from the incel when he said, "It makes me think of Marxism." And that's actually not only is that not that hostile, it's actually not that unfair. But when the Asian guy said, "Well, I think that it was good, but it's kind of gone off the deep end," and then Christoff said it's flawed, I mean, those are polite criticisms. But when the women responded to what their thoughts were on the MRM, one of them was like, "I just want to laugh at this idea. Like, it's just so laughable." And that is, and then there's aggression. So there is deep hostility towards just the idea of a men's movement. Just like before we've even talked about it, you can see that there's deep hostility. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Deep hostility, laughter towards the very idea that men deserve rights. Something that has been fought for throughout all of human history. And like you were saying, very pointed but reasonable criticisms, unless they're going to say that feminism as a human construct is completely without flaw and cannot be criticized at all, which is possibly the biggest criticism of feminism anyone could lay on its feet. And then also the observation that feminists is Marxist. Many feminists would agree that they have applied class struggle to the relationship between men and women. They would admit to that.
Absolutely,
so
they would.
An observation that feminists would agree with, an observation that's consistent with human reality. In other words, products of human minds have flaws. And also, well, it was good once, but it's sort of gone off the rails. This is really mild criticism.
Very. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, ask Erin Pitsy what she would say. Yeah, no, absolutely. We'd all go way further. I would have said it's a, decades-long gaslighting campaign against men and women that has screwed us all up. So I want to read the super chats really quick before we get into the meat of it, because I've gotten a lot already. So thanks, guys, for your donations. Meredith Glassberg gives us $10 and doesn't write anything, so just gives us $10. Mr. Roboto gives us $2 and says, "How does one become an incel advocate?" Well, actually, I will say this. I watched another video on the same channel, Jubilee, that featured the incel, and it's the same incel guy, but it was called Ask Me Anything, where people were allowed to go into a sort of like a confession booth type of thing, where they couldn't see him, but they could talk to him, and they would ask him whatever question they want. And they had it supposedly open to the street, but who knows? But the point is, though, as an incel advocate, what he wants to do, what Derek's goal is by his own words at least, is that he wants to remove the negative stigma associated with incel, which I think is, I think it's laudable. So I will give him credit for that. I just don't think he was the right guy for this panel. So.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. Here's the thing. If Jubilee really wanted an honest discussion, there were a number of prominent MRAs they could have invited to, many of whom are excellent debaters and very presentable. For example, Kara, Janice Fiamengo. And I'm just talking about the women. I guess you could say me as well. You know, you could have gone to one of us, and it would have been a much more honest presentation than what you have done here. You have one MRA, two guys who are somewhat related. You know, one guy who speculates on gender, so he's as related to the MRA as he is to the feminists, and an incel who doesn't identify as an MRA. Like, how can you honestly say you are for the human good when you are misrepresenting a position this badly?
Yeah. All right. Next super chat. French Honey Badger gives us $5 and says, all men on the men's rights side and all women on the feminist side seem suspect. Yeah, I think that Christoff said that he asked them to get a female MRA on, but they didn't. I guess they just didn't do it. I think that would have just broken people's brains, that there would be a woman that would actually care about men and not feminism. So I guess they couldn't do that. Zaranx gives us $5 and says, Zach King, that's the Asian guy, has identified himself as an MRA recently. Well, that's cool. I'll bring him on the show sometime and talk to him. Hopefully, if I can find him. Mr. Roboto gives us $5 and says, the only way to deal with feminists is with genuine ladies who know history of the world and life, a sound, truthful observer of the present and past. Okay, thank you for the super chats. Now I'm going to move on. We're going to talk a little bit about... okay, this comment.
Times.
I've studied evolutionary biology quite a bit, and men and women are very different from not just a physical, the bone structure, the neurological department as well as the chemical balances, and also I don't believe that men and women are equal under the law either, or they should be rather.
Okay, I'm going to pause it here because I got to explain something. So the way that they do the show is they have, usually it's 3 representatives from one side of the argument or the fence and 3 from the other side of the fence, and they have them meet each other, and then they have them stand in their own groups under like a spotlight. So like the one side is here and the one side is there. And then they ask them a question, and they ask the people who agree with it to step, or they make a statement. They say, if you agree with the statement, step forward and sit in the chairs. If you don't, then stay where you are. So they asked, the statement they made was, men and women are not the same, but they are equal. And I mean, kind of a tricky question. So Christoff came forward, and all 3 of the feminist women came forward, and they chatted a little bit about it. The wage gap was brought up. Christoff shot it down immediately. He said that, no, this has been debunked a million times. And now the guys who don't believe that men and women are, they don't agree with the statement, men and women are not the same, but are equal, are now sitting down. And that's what the incel is responding to. He's sort of explaining his position. So I should have clarified that, but I'm like jumping ahead a little bit.
Children are not equal under the law. And it's not because we hate children, it's because we love them and we want to protect them.
So if you believe we're not equal, then that you're inferring that one would be greater than the other.
Well, so let me.
So that's why.
So, okay, so he doesn't think men and women are equal. Now they're trying to explain their positions. Go ahead.
Why is the assumption that when 2 people differ, one has to be superior? Like, the problem that I see here is, I see in the first image that I saw was one of these women essentially with an appearance and a demeanor of extremely smug dominance, looking down her nose and smiling smugly at something. I don't know what it was. And I know I'm just reading facial and physical gestures, but I'm like, this is somebody who likes dominance, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And right here, we begin with this idea that somehow, people having different traits creates a hierarchy.
Yeah.
Traits don't necessarily exist in a hierarchy. They exist. They aren't resources. They aren't like money. You have more money than you're higher in the dominance hierarchy. They're useful in different situations. When you say that men and women are different, you're simply saying that they have different skill sets, which may be useful in different situations, which are useful in different situations. You're not saying one is better or worse than the
No.
And I think that really reveals her own mindset, that she thinks that this ultimately relates to some kind of dominance situation or dominance struggle.
Yeah, well, there has to be a winner and a loser. And if there is a loser, it's because the winner did something to the loser to make them a loser. It's not because one person is just necessarily better than the other. And I think that Jubilee made the actual statement itself is unfair because, you know, like the word equal, it's kind of lost its real meaning. And I think that you have to like start thinking about what is meant by equality when people even bring it up, and does that even have value? Is that even a virtue that we should be pursuing? Because not only are men and women not equal, but men and men aren't equal, and women aren't equal. Like we're all different. So like this is in my opinion, and maybe I'm being a little bit too nitpicky about this, but I think that the original framing of the statement sets anybody who disagrees with it up for immediate dismissal, because how dare you even believe that men and women are not equal? And even if you agree with the statement that they are not the same. And so you have to I think that these guys are just put in an unfortunate position. So because the women, all three feminists agreed that men and women are not the same, but they are equal. All three of them came forward and sat down. So that question or that statement already sort of co-sign with their bias. So I think that Jubilee has a bias. I mean, I can tell by how they edited the video first off, but even how they sort of propose their statements, because it doesn't allow for the kind of really involved discussion you need to have take place so that people can actually understand why men's issues matter, why the ideas of equality, the ideas of hierarchies and patriarchy and oppression and victimhood have to actually be analyzed before you can even start to talk about, what the men's issues are. I mean, you can list them off, but if people already assume that, everything is run by men to the benefit of men, then no matter what you say, they can dismiss it and say, well, that's the fault of patriarchy. So I don't know. That's just my opinion, but.
And once again, I have to go back to Jubilee's stated goal, which is the human good. Well, certainly creating a hit piece on recognizing and talking about men's issues, issues of facing half the human race, certainly dismissing them and doing this is certainly going to advance the cause of human good.
Yeah.
Bang up job, Jubilee. Bang up job.
Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to the next basic clip, but to sort of frame what happened there, this guy, Zach, he basically didn't go forward and sit down because he believes that men and women are not equal because they serve different purposes. That was his view. He's more of the whole, well, this is the gender roles and this is how it evolved, blah, blah, blah. And the incel guy believes that essentially we should make the laws to essentially treat women like a protected class, but by that they would also not be they'd be more in line with children. So they'd have and that's what he says. That he says, not because we don't like children, but because we love them, but we want to protect them. So he's super tradcon, way over the top, right? But I think that this is what he really believes. I don't think this is a plant. I don't think this is what because a lot of incels say that they want to go back to like a soft patriarchy. Of course, they don't realize there never was one. I don't know why they thought that was true, but that's what he says. So this is what, of course, that didn't go over very well with the feminists. So I'm going to play this clip here.
The family, raising children, but also just for overall well-being.
I want to note that you brought up children being unequal to adults. I just hope you weren't comparing women to children.
I mean, it was technically a comparison of women and children.
I don't need you to protect me. I just need you not to harm me. I can protect myself.
Okay.
Wait, let me finish this clip. I'm sorry. Let me finish this.
I'm very capable of doing what I need to do. Okay?
Okay, sure.
100%.
Okay.
All right. Well, first of all, if you want to not be put in the position of child, don't speak like one.
Yeah.
Like seriously, your diction, the way that you are speaking emulates a child. You're sitting there right there pretending to be a child and saying you don't want to be treated like a child. If you want to be respected as an adult, don't use that kind of whimpery, crackly, vocal fry voice. Now, speak, you don't have to speak necessarily aggressively. Speak with confidence. This is what baffles me. A lot of these women present like infants. They present like their vestibular system isn't fully developed. They can barely speak, and their lungs have the capacity of walnuts, so they're constantly out of breath. Like, you are aping vulnerability, weakness, and childhood while you are saying, "Do not treat me like a child." Well, you want to be treated like a child because you are pretending to be one. I assume, from what I've seen, she's an adult female, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
okay, so she has an adult vestibular system. She has an adult lung capacity. She should act like. All right, so
well,
that's one thing that I had to say.
All right. Go. Is you something else?
What the hell does this have to do with men's rights?
Well, that's the thing, though. The Jubilee question is, men and women are not the same but equal, and this is where this went. Because
so basically has nothing to do with men's rights.
It's not about any issues.
Nothing. It's not about issues. It's not about legal rights. And we're now talking about nonsense that this guy brought up about putting women into the status of legal children or wards, actually, is what it was.
It's actually doing more harm than good, this guy's statement. But like, her response is actually it's actually irrational as well, because she says to him, actually, I don't need you to do anything for me. I can take care of myself. I just need you to not hurt me. So what she's saying is, I don't need you to protect me, but I do need you to protect me from yourself. So she is saying, I need you to protect me, because if she really felt that she didn't need any help from him, then she wouldn't be asking him to do anything for her, which is what she's doing. So you have to like call. And by the way, what he was talking about was not about her specifically, which is another thing that a lot of feminists bring up, is they say, oh, well, in my case, or for me, it's like, that doesn't matter, right? I mean, even if this guy's generalizations are off, if he's off the mark, you have to stop with the whole, well, that's not me, because that's bullshit. You have to like, okay, do you have data that supports this will apply to most women or not, or most men or not? Well, that's all that matters. So, but anyway.
Also, in the interests of the debate aspect of this, I'd like to point out that she's using a threat narrative as well. Yeah. She's framing this man as being potentially dangerous to her in order to establish the high ground as the most vulnerable in the situation. This is not necessarily a debate technique. It is a dominance technique, and she's employing it. So she's essentially dominating this man and putting him in a position to be the target of proxy violence should she need to do that. or want to do it. So she's basically stripping our sense of his humanity by presenting him as a danger to her. So I want to point that, because this is something that flies under the radar with a lot of people. When a woman says something like, I just need you not to hurt, she's presuming that he wants to hurt her, that he has the capability to hurt her, that he's more powerful than she is and thus able to hurt her, and has the intention to do so. That is a threat narrative. And if you don't know what a threat narrative is, it is essentially a story that you tell to make somebody appear to be. This is a story that she's telling to the viewers, to Jubilee, to anyone, to make him seem like a. And incidentally, this is actually something that's consistent with war propaganda too. Societies will tell themselves stories about groups of people to make them seem like a bigger. So it's really, again, it's really interesting that Jubilee would include this when they're talking about being about the greater good, when they're include someone engaging in this kind of behavior, and say that are about the greater good. But the things that are consistent with war propaganda and genocide, this idea of inflating someone's threat, he is posing no threat. He's just sitting there. Absolutely no. In fact, realistically, she's a greater physical threat to him. And the reason why is there's multiple reasons. One, he has a hormonal system that prevents, unless it's damaged, it prevents him from doing violence to her. She doesn't have the reverse. So men actually have a hormonal system that prevents them doing violence to women. Women don't in reverse. And secondly, she is capable of dog whistling other men to do violence to him should she wish it. So not only is she presenting him as the greater threat, she herself is the greater threat, and she's making herself more threatening by taking away social sympathy for this guy. She is enabling violence against him, all in this one little episode. And we don't call out this behavior. We just let it fly under the radar. If this woman was on my show, I would have stopped her in that moment and said, stop being a bull.
Yeah.
Stop.
Well, that's exactly right.
Establishing social dominance over this guy, increasing the odds that he is going to be beaten or damaged by another human. Stop being a thug, lady. And also, if you're going to act like a thug, don't do it in your little breathless child voice. Okay, I'm done.
Okay.
Right, done.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the next hot take, which is about the next question. So
contextual on the subject.
Toxic masculinity is real.
All right, prediction. Who's gonna walk forward? Toxic masculinity is real, is the statement. What do you think? How many of the feminists are gonna walk? How many of the feminists do you think?
All of them.
How many of the men?
I don't know. Maybe the incel, maybe the guy who doesn't, the ones who don't identify as men's rights activists. Although,
let's find out. Without hesitation.
I think that toxic masculinity is definitely a real thing.
What gives you the right to judge someone else's gender identity, lady? Someone else's gender expression? What gives you the frickin' right to do that?
Yeah.
You are thugs. It's just, oh God, this really gets under my frickin' collar. Like, this all starts from the presumption that men should be judged just by how they affect. We never consider how men should be treated, how men should actually be benefited, and that maybe men should have some aspect of their identity that's their own, that isn't just about serving women and making sure women are comfortable and tolerating women and swallowing women's bad behavior, because that was just bad behavior on the part of that one woman. Bad behavior in framing, in taking a page out of war propaganda and framing another human being as a threat. Like, oh.
You know, for contrast's sake, recently there was a woman in the UK who cut a guy's face with a glass, you know, from a bar, and I mean, like, basically disfigured him. And she, did you drop out, Alison?
No, I'm still here.
Oh, okay,
Don't
okay.
worry.
When she was put before the judge, he shamed her and he wagged his finger at her, but he didn't give her any jail time. He just told her to act like an adult and let her go. But toxic masculinity is the problem here. That was just a woman who was just hysterical and she's just learned to grow up. And yet we're not, but we shouldn't actually tailor the laws to treat women like children, because we already fucking do.
Yeah. What? Okay. When do you not want women to be treated like children, feminists? Because they already are when it comes to consequences to their criminal actions, and also consequences to their not criminal but still unethical actions, like framing another human being as a threat.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. But anyway, so they're talking about toxic masculinity.
It's kind of just the idea of what masculinity should be, but it goes wrong a lot of the times, saying that violence, sex, power, being a controlling person makes you a man.
I see it.
Okay, stop right there.
I did.
There are almost no men who conceptualize being a man in that way.
No, that's absolutely not a thing. But I will say this. When it does happen, it's because that guy was raised by a single mom and was no, it is. It's because of he was raised by a single mother. He was surrounded by women like that raised him either in public systems like schools and daycare, and he was around gangs with other men that were also raised by single mothers. Basically, what feminists are calling toxic masculinity is the product of feminine intervention into a man's development. And isn't it surprising that these women are actually doing the exact same thing? They are women intervening and defining and trying to shape and control masculinity and talk about what masculinity is with three men in the room that are in the back waiting for their turn to actually say something in defense of their own masculinity.
Yeah, and then ultimately, if you're in a position where you're just defending your right to exist, you are basically on the very, very bottom of this particular dominance hierarchy, because that's where these men are at. They're just defending their right to exist, and their right. Oh, and also, most likely they're defending the idea that there is something positive to masculinity. It's interesting that this feminist said that, toxic masculinity is where masculinity goes wrong. Well, as far as I can tell, so far, year and counting, there is not one feminist who can tell me a positive trait associated with masculinity in the same way that they associate toxic masculinity with masculinity. 1 year and counting, still no positive traits. So what they're actually saying is that toxic masculinity is all masculinity. And once again, almost no men associate the things you just said with masculinity or manliness.
Yeah. And all the negative, basically what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, all negative behavior that gets used or touted as examples of toxic masculinity is the product of a masculine man raised by a feminine mindset. And by the way, those ideas that men have to man up and not cry and not share their feelings, those are imposed by women, not by men. Those come from women. Men know how to open up to other men. We don't do it the same way women do it, but we do it. But when a man does not act, he doesn't want to show weakness, because women collectively have said that that is unattractive to them. So to pretend like that's not an enormous factor is absolutely disingenuous. But anyway, we'll continue with this clip.
Very unfortunate places, like when the young men or boys in my family, even from like toddler age, are told you shouldn't be crying. Boys don't cry. And what that turns into. I see it when I'm in a bookstore and a guy who tries to get my number says, "Why y'all always gotta act like that?" And he sincerely had this like cracking voice, like he was hurt, but it was an entitlement. And that's toxic masculinity.
What?
A guy got rejected and then said something regarding his rejection because he got his feelings hurt, and that's toxic masculinity.
Okay, but did you notice how she just contradicted herself in the space of like 2 sentences? Was that like a edit intended to discredit?
No,
because she
no,
said,
that's what she said.
Okay,
I'm
all
pretty
right,
sure
let
Jubilee
me-
would have caught it. Allison, your camera's glitching pretty bad, but
okay, then I'm gonna turn it off, and you
maybe
you
we'll
guys
just
aren't
turn it
gonna get
off.
any more film footage from me in my volcanic lair. All right, okay. Let me unpack that, shall we say? Because this is HBR debate. She just said toxic masculinity is when toddlers in her family are not allowed to cry, or boys are told to swallow the tears and to not express their negative emotions or their sadness. And then an adult man comes to her, tries to get her number. She rejects him. He expresses sadness, and she calls it entitlement in order to tell him you don't have a right to your sadness. This is what really bakes my noodle about feminists. Men aren't allowed to have anything to be sad about because that means they're entitled. He can't be sad about her rejecting him because that's entitlement. Men can't be sad about losing their children because that's entitlement. Men can't be sad about, I don't know, being raped because that's him feeling entitled to having your consent respected. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you see where this is going.
I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. I've seen some stuff with like rappers. There's a lot of hip hop artists that have stories of like being raped by adult women when they were young, like very young, like 11. And yeah, not a lot of sympathy.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. But this word entitlement is a way of telling a little toddler, just smacking him upside the head and saying, you know what? You're crying? I'm going to give you something to cry about, and then spinning him around and smacking his ass till it bleeds. Maybe getting a whip or a rod and just laying into him, you know, until you have to hide it from child services. That's what it is. That's what the word entitlement is. It's denying men's right to feel sad, to feel like a loss, because you are saying that loss is illegitimate on its face. And not just that, you're threatening them when you do it. You're entitled. Essentially what you're saying is, this man who was rejected by you, who felt sad, just like your little kid brother who's sad because he didn't get a toy that he wanted or a muffin that he wanted. You're saying to this man, you have no right to your sadness. And in fact, your sadness makes you a rapist, because you exist on a continuum with other men who feel so entitled to women's bodies that they don't take no for an answer. You are threatening his standing as a legitimate human being. Meanwhile, you are saying it's wrong to train little toddlers that this is the reality they're going to face when they grow up to be men and try to get your number. What do you want? Do you want your little toddler relatives, your little boy toddler relatives, to not grow up, to be able to control their emotions when you reject them? Because right now, what you are asking for is complete and utter stoicism, to the point where a man is rejected by you and he has no emotions, no perceptible emotions, because otherwise it's entitlement. And of course, when you say entitlement, you mean he's a rapist.
Yep.
You freaking disgusting human beings. Oh my God. Inconsistent, selfish thugs. Do you think they could have gotten some feminists that actually are not a bunch of people who are essentially excusing the most vile, dark, and ugly aspects of who they are? I mean, seriously, how do you go from let's not beat a kid for crying to let's say something that could get a man jailed for crying? How do you do that?
I think that if they did do that, they would probably not really have a feminist up there. I bet even feminists would say that person's not a real feminist because she's not bullying them emotionally for being men. And the worst part is that unless you're really paying attention, a lot of people would not see what these ladies are doing as what it is because they don't see that social aggression that is so openly being displayed. They would just see it as women sticking up for themselves or clapping back or whatever. But I mean, this is like, this whole discussion actually puts men on the back foot because women have so much social power that if their positions are absolutely ridiculously irrational, they would still get more of the benefit of the doubt than you would expect because they're women engaging in a social space. So,
well, I don't get the benefit of the doubt from me.
No, of course not.
So far, all I've seen is thuggery from the feminists.
Oh, yeah.
An attempt to dehumanize the incel, by presenting him as a threat, calling a man crying entitled because he has a sense of loss or sadness, which, of course, entitled is something that gropes towards that particular man being a threat, like a rapist.
It's just another one of their buzzwords, though, honestly. It doesn't even mean what it's supposed to mean. It's just another word that they've distorted.
But essentially what it means is this man feels entitled to my body like a rapist would.
Mm-hmm.
So it's another way of presenting him as a threat in order to remove his humanity. So this guy is upset that she's rejected him, which he's obviously accepted. Otherwise he wouldn't be upset. He'd just be like, game on, lady. So he's obviously accepted her rejection, and it's upsetting because it's hard to be rejected. And that expresses his entitlement. And his entitlement is, of course, a buzzword that means he's part of rape culture.
Yeah.
And once you start with the rape culture, everybody's brains turn off and they just say, oh, he's a rapist. Let's remove any humanity.
Yeah,
so
maybe we should lynch him after the show.
Yeah. So all I'm seeing is a bunch of thugs going around removing people's humanity. Okay, let's see if there's anything redeeming about these individuals.
All right. Let's continue then.
It's saying like, you don't realize how your behavior is harmful.
By the way, this black woman was talking about how all of her brothers are told that they, like brothers and boys in her family are being told, that they shouldn't cry and they should man up and all that. And even as toddlers, statistically, they're probably all raised by single mothers. Let's be real.
Yeah, and the other thing is that what do you freaking think man up means? It means be able to put women's emotions first.
Yes.
Don't
be a burden. Don't be a burden, basically, to me.
If you are rejected by a woman, don't express your sadness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Like that, what do you think they're doing? They're teaching your male relatives to abide by your requests of them to avoid being demonized by you as a woman. Like you got and she doesn't even see the logical steps here. You have a toddler. You need to teach him that nobody cares about his emotions. And in fact, if he expresses them to this woman or to any woman, potentially, if he expresses his sadness, she'll come back by dehumanizing him, which could potentially get him killed. So learn to swallow it, boys. Learn to keep it under your hat because things could get worse if you express your sadness. Women like this could call you entitled and then start to inch you towards being perceived as a threat to them. And then you're really in the shit. So just be stoic.
Yep. All right. So now we're going to get into the discussion on toxic masculinity. This is just full of golden moments. Before I get into it, Zach here looks like he's powering up, and Kursat's doing like he's on the catwalk. It's like the model walk. It's just a funny place to pause. I'm just pointing it out. If you guys see what I see, give me a.
I do indeed see what you say. Let's get the joy where we can, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Let's get the joy where we can.
Somebody's about to hit their final form. Okay, let's continue.
What does toxic masculinity mean? Is it character traits? Is it upbringing?
The suppression of feeling. for a lot of men, because throughout childhood they're told man up. So because of that, there's a lot of repression.
By women.
Okay.
Then,
Whoa. Is this from the same woman who said, I can't tell because everything's so dim.
I know. I'm sorry. I had to put filters up just to protect us from copyright strikes. But the original video is pretty dark too. So there's a black woman. She's all the way on the end or in the back there. And then there's like a mixed woman or something in the middle. And then there's another woman who is either Hispanic or white. I don't know. That's on the outside. So the
okay,
woman
I don't think it was the same woman.
No, the woman in the middle is, and I mean, you know, she's the most charitable feminist, but that's not. I'm not giving. Don't take that as me giving her that much credit.
Is she the black woman who was speaking?
No, the black woman is a different. The one that was like that talked about laughing at MRAs. No, that's a different. That's the woman that's on the left. That's the closest to the.
I'm not going to ask any
center.
more inane questions. I'm just going to point out that literally, if you are going to dehumanize a man for expressing an emotion, why are you turning around and telling parents you shouldn't actually train their boys not to express emotions? If that's the standard you're going to hold men to, really, okay.
All right, let's move on.
is usually channeled into anger for some people.
Notice this, by the way, Zach is asking the women to define toxic masculinity for them before he tries to counter, because he's actually trying to be really civil here. So
let me drop a statistic. Even according to feminist studies, teenage boys are less likely to express anger than teenage girls. Just dropping that there. So this individual is misinformed. But let us move on.
All right. Before we do, I'm going to blast through the super chats because I did get a bunch of them. So Joel Cates Jr. gives us $2, sends nothing. Thank you. Jonathan Rosler gives us $5 and says, it seems like a lot of feminists act like children, do so unconsciously rather than actively putting up an act. No, I think that's just their nature. Exploding Pretty gives us $5 and says, I think I heard about that UK case, dude. I believe the judge said girls will be girls. Yeah, I think so. That's right. Meredith Glassberg gives us $10 and says, anytime the words equal and equity are used in human rights discussions, it's a trap. Human rights should be about equality. Equal, equity, and equality are not interchangeable terms. I think fairness is the word I like the most. I don't even like the word equality personally, but Mr. Roboto gives us $2 and says, women are treated like royalty, kids have rules. Yeah, I guess there is a little bit of a difference. That is a good point. Okay, so I'm going to play the rest of the clip.
Not always know how to express because they're told not to express.
So upbringing and
that's part of it.
Okay,
yes.
But not something that's inherently a part of men. Okay.
No.
I think that when you're showing your emotions, especially to random people, random women in some cases, they will view you as weak. I was raised by a single mother. I love her. She's my mom. I love her. But I could have used being told to act like a man. I think back, there were some cases where I was too emotional, and that negatively affected how I, what happened to me.
Okay, well, yeah, because if you had hit on this woman and then got sad about it, she would have called you entitled. In other words, that you were a man who feels entitled to her body and part of rape culture. Therefore, you are complicit in social attitudes that enable rape. Therefore, you should have less social sympathy. And maybe you should be beaten, taken out back and beaten.
Yeah.
We could,
Yeah, this guy is actually the result of another, likely outcome of men who are raised by single mothers. So they either turn into, in the hood, like where I grew up, they end up in gangs, and the chances of them going to prison are way higher, not finishing school, etc. But that's because the environment is such that a kind of like over, how do I put this, an overly nurtured child is not going to survive. So the mothers tend to be harder on them, and they actually tend to beat them too. But in his case, he probably grew up more comfortably, although still by a single mother. And so she smothered him, and he is more emotional than your average man. He's admitting to this, and he actually believes that he wished that he had somebody to toughen him up so that he would probably do better. And he also makes the point, and it's the point that I already made, that it's women that he's most concerned about with regards to expressing his emotions, because he doesn't want the judgment that comes from women to affect his odds. And I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, if this is one of the reasons why he's an incel, because he's not like a deformed and ugly dude. So like if he had a father in his life, he might have had, he probably would have had a completely different outcome. He'd probably be more confident. He probably would know what a healthy relationship looked like. He would see an example of how men and women engage with each other in a healthy way. Like if the father and the mother were still together and they were still happy. So he would know what that was because they would have modeled it for him, and he probably would have turned out, he wouldn't even be on this panel. So, but, here we are. But let's see what the feminists have to say about that. Alison, you want to add anything before I move on?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And I'm curious, like, I'm listening to this, I'm wondering how being raised by a single mother affected his attitude that men should take responsibility for women like women are children.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm gonna cogitate on that while we listen to the next one.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going then.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
What is your definition of weak as a man?
Not being as forward as you could be, not being as honest, or trying to be not as emotional as you don't need to be. You don't have to cry over a cut. I know sometimes cuts hurt a lot, but sometimes it's necessary to be strong for the benefit of not just yourself, but for the people around you. It's fine to act emotional in certain cases, but I don't think it's fine to act that way with a woman. Maybe you have a really good friend and he sees you cry, like he's your best friend, and you're crying about something really personal. I think that's fine.
I feel like you're conflating two different situations, because you started off with saying a random person or even women. So it feels like, okay, this is a woman that you don't have a bond with or any type of relationship with. And then you mentioned, or in front of your best friend. That's okay to cry. Well, that woman could be your best friend. That, so.
Hold on. I know she's trying to distort his words, but he has something that he adds to that too.
I don't think you can be friends with a woman. So
he says, I don't think you can be friends with a woman.
Oh my God, look at that face.
I know.
Oh my God. She's like, oh shit, this is beautiful. I'm going in for the kill. Oh my God, that's the face of that's the face of somebody he's like, shit, dog, you just made a huge mistake there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna take you out.
Yes. But remember, he just explained, his own vulnerabilities. His go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I just wonder if the fact that he was raised by a single mother might actually be contributing to, I wonder how genuinely he believes the stuff he says, and whether or not he's just using it as a way to piss off women.
I think,
in particular women.
The more I think about this, I think that he seems to be somewhat impressionable. So let's put a couple of things together, and I do have some information that maybe you don't have. Number one, I followed this. I looked up this guy on the internet to see where else he's been, because he's a YouTuber and he has a YouTube channel where he talks about, inceldom and all that. But maybe put in a little bit of context, okay? He was raised by a single mother. He doesn't have his father in his life. He was on Jesse Lee Peterson's show. So Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson had him on to talk about his incel, dumb, I guess. And they talked at length, I imagine. And I know Jesse Lee Peterson always asks the same kinds of questions and always makes the same points. So he probably made those points with him. And I think that it left an impression on him because he is making some of the arguments that Jesse Lee Peterson makes. And I wonder if it isn't because Jesse Lee Peterson is a man and because he is a man that has done well for himself and has something to say about men, that this guy doesn't look up to him in some way, and it didn't, like, their interactions had not rubbed off on him, and it's like looking for his father in other men, right? So I wonder if that's not what we're talking about, because when he says, I think he said something that Jesse Lee Peterson has literally said, oh yeah, about men being weak and about how they need to, what they need to change. Yeah. And that, like, women aren't going to, women and men can't be friends. I don't know if Jesse Lee Peterson's ever said that, but I know incels say that. And, but I think that there might be something there. That's all I'm saying.
I just wonder if this is really about being, like, cheeky to someone he perceives to be the power in the room.
Yeah, or someone who he knows is not going to take what he says seriously, even if he's being really serious. And he assumes that they don't have a shred of sympathy for him, and so it doesn't matter what he says, so he may as well be trolly.
Yeah, I think this really strikes me as trolly. Also, well, once again, what the hell does this have to do with men's rights? But
nothing.
The other thing that I want,
they're talking about toxic masculinity, which I guess you have to talk about in order to get to talk about men's rights, because it's the number one argument that feminists make when MRAs bring up men's problems. It's like their new.
It's everything is the result of toxic masculinity. Yeah.
Yep.
This is their go-to argument for dismissing all potential vulnerabilities or issues that men have.
Yeah, you have to tear that down before you can talk about men's issues. Otherwise, feminists would just throw that at you,
and endlessly. And all I do is I say, well, can you give me a positive? Well, of course it is. It's essentially what it is it's stonewalling based on their control over men's identities. First, you have to prove to us that your identity is worth. You have to get through the gate. And you have to do that by proving that you are a good man, and then maybe we'll consider something. Not really, but maybe. But the other thing I wanted to point out is this: he doesn't seem to really have an understanding of what fatherhood is.
No, he doesn't. He also doesn't seem to have a really good understanding about masculinity. I think he's still figuring that stuff out.
Yeah, because the fathers are. Well, yeah, they'll probably toughen you up, but in a particular context, and that context is having more compassion for other people.
Mm-hmm.
So you will learn not to be the emotional center of the room, because you will start to have compassion for other people's emotions and needs. So that a child wants to be the emotional center of the room. And fathers in particular teach children that other people exist, and how to share that emotional center with other people and consider their needs as well. Which, thinking about it, who in this room is taught to consider other people's needs? I mean, as a part of their gender identity, as a very much a part of their gender identity, because men, the word man isn't really something that we give to men just because they have a penis and testicles. It's a word that they have to earn through their actions, specifically service to others.
Yeah.
And stoicism, and the ability to set aside their own emotional needs and let other people be the emotional center. And funnily enough, all of this that we're seeing just is another echo and reflection of that. These feminists are demanding to be the emotional center. They're demanding that men concede that territory to them. And the very idea that somehow men might have a right to be centered, their needs to be centered, that they might have a right to have their rights considered, means that women aren't always centered. And they can't stand that. They have to appeal to the idea that men's identities revolve around centering women's needs. Because ultimately, if you're not a man, if you don't serve, well, the only people left to serve are women. So men, to be men, have to center women's needs, either for protection or provision, taking a bullet for them, making sure that they have a roof over their heads, etc., etc., etc. And also demanding that other men abide by certain standards of behavior that don't offend women. So it's all the same thing. It's all about centering men's identity on women. And toxic masculinity is another iteration of that. It's saying, well, men have issues, but the real problem is that they don't center their identity on women enough.
Yep.
Oh, man. Okay.
All right, moving on.
Because you don't see us as equal, as you said before.
I don't think showing emotions is a sign of weakness. I actually think it's a sign of strength. Men do live shorter lives, and that's because of a repression of emotions, and that's due to many things that patriarchy has instilled.
Repression of emotions.
It has been shown that a person's well-being, their lifespan is shortened when they are not able to express their emotions. In addition, when they don't have physical touch or when they don't have a partner to keep them company. We're human beings here.
Okay, all right, wait. We're human beings here, okay? But your sister in arms just dehumanized a man for being sad about being rejected. You just said that not having physical touch, not having relationships can kill people, but men are entitled for wanting them? Like, did you call her out for that?
No.
Like, seriously?
Well, we don't know, actually, because, again, you know, this was heavily edited.
Like an
so
hour and a half of editing.
Yeah, 2 hours.
Well, okay.
2 hours.
Okay, madam. If you did call her out, I will officially apologize to you. But seriously, if you're going to sit beside somebody who says, yeah, I rejected this man and he was sad, and that means he's entitled, he's a part of rape culture, thinks he's entitled to my body, he's almost the same as a rapist because he was sad about being rejected. And then you say, oh, by the way, not getting touched and not having relationships, sort of an essential need, like, I don't know, water, food, basic income, as these people would probably say, you know, and you're essentially dehumanizing a man for feeling entitled to something that would keep him alive. And he doesn't necessarily even feel entitled to it because presumably he didn't push the issue after the rejection aside from saying something that, you know, I'm sad about this or something that essentially expressed that. So he obviously, I mean, I feel entitled to the money in my bank. You know, when my bank doesn't give it to me, I feel entitled to it. When a man asks you out or asks for your number and then you say no and he says, well, that makes me feel sad, that doesn't mean he's entitled to it. It means he was like, oh, maybe at this moment I can have access to something that can keep me alive. Oh no, I guess not. I feel sad. I'm going to go home now and weep into my pillow. And you're screaming, oh, you're so entitled. You're so undeserving of human sympathy for wanting something that you have just said is necessary for life. Okay, can you guys just, all right, feminists, if you ever want me to count myself among your number, which, you know, I think that ship has sailed 15 years ago, please start being more consistent in your expectations of men, because right now you are expecting men to be 300 different things that are completely contradictory.
Yeah, it's never going to happen. Andrew Shaw gets his $5 Canadian, says, women think it's easy to share emotions because when women do it, the response is always sympathy.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. Thank you for that. Very good point.
Here's the other thing. I'm going to drop another statistic on everyone. Men who are less feminist feel more able to share their emotions with other men and other people and ask for help from other people. Isn't that interesting? Men who don't buy into toxic masculinity are more likely to express their emotions and feel like they're legitimate. Just dropping that one.
All right, let's move on.
To talk to each other. And if you think that our health isn't affected when you're not able to express that you are sad or upset, you're wrong.
So she, at the end of the day, if men don't engage with their toxic masculinity, women most affected.
Well, is that not exactly what I was saying?
Yes, exactly. Yes,
back to men's identity has to
puts it right out there. Nobody can see it.
It's
right there.
She just shoves it right out. It's like, okay, so basically all the women have done is engaged in social thuggery by trying to frame the men that they're having this so-called debate, and they're trying. I mean, how the hell do you? how the hell does Jubilee conceptualize this? Yeah, women, go punch the shit out of these guys. I mean, metaphorically, they're just doing it socially by removing all human sympathy for them. And something good will come of that. We're working towards the human good here. Jesus Christ. Play the Pawn Farm music or whatever the hell. Working towards the human good in a death struggle, death match to the end.
Yeah.
Like, what? All right. And then the other thing they're doing is saying that men's identity should ultimately revolve around women's needs. Oh, boy. And where do you even start with that? I mean, your very existence is rendered illegitimate by that framing, by the toxic masculinity framing. So you're starting nowhere. How do you even argue with somebody who has established that your identity is basically they have complete control over it, and that's the way it should be? Yep. Where do you go from there except just doing what they say? Okay.
All right, let's keep going. There are some really good moments in this, though, like some that are worthy of some cheer. It's basically when Christoff gets to talk. I mean, he talked throughout the whole video, but there aren't that many clips in the version that Jubilee put out. Let's put it that way. All right, so what does this woman have to say about MRAs?
I think that men's rights activists are only men's rights activists as a response to women expressing that they want more equality. I don't think they focus on actual men's rights issues, and rather it's just an attack on women and feminism.
What?
That's the usual, though. That's what they always say. Women are taking up space now, and men are big mad. It's like...
Okay. Do you understand what equality means?
No, of course not.
Equal rights means you have to look at both sides. You can't just out of hand dismiss one side when you're saying, well, women are not equal. Well, not equal to what? Well, we don't want to look at men's rights because blah, blah, blah. They're just afraid of women grabbing more equality for themselves. I think you don't know what the word equality means. Like, literally, you're saying we don't have to listen to men's rights activists because they are just worried about women grabbing more equality. Well, at what point do you step back and say, hey, we have to actually listen to people outside of our echo chamber in terms of this word equality? Because we can't actually know if something is equal if we don't measure both sides. And if we spend all of our time saying measuring the other side is immoral and wrong and misogynist, how the hell do you know if you've achieved equality? Like, is there any point in time? Do you have a mechanism as a feminist of determining when you've achieved equality? If you have achieved it, if you've maybe overshot it, do you allow for any kind of criticism of what you are doing? Do you allow for any measurement of the other side that you constantly say you are not equal to? If you don't, then you will never know if you overshoot equality and you are actually perpetrating inequality. So you are basically a car with no brakes. And people are saying maybe you should have some brakes because, if you're saying that we can't measure the other side, we never have to measure the other side, it really starts sounding that what you really are about is, what is the word for it? Supremacy?
Yeah. All right. Moving on. I think I got no, I didn't get any more super chats. So, okay, let's move on. This is the next question.
Today, women have more advantages than men.
I can speak from a hiring standpoint when it comes to things like affirmative action, and there are certain roles that traditionally men and women have been able to serve in, and now women can basically do all of those things, right? Because we've had such a strong advocacy for equal representation in the workplace, whereas, for example, you'll never find a man as a midwife nurse, and I don't think it's appropriate. That's why there are those differences.
Women in the most important parts of society have an advantage. There's a lot of positions that men simply aren't getting hired at anymore because of the fact that they're a man. And it's not just in the workforce, it's also...
I wish he had clarified this a little bit to say things like, it's a lot more difficult for men to get jobs, say, in early education, because there's a tremendous amount of paranoia around men working with very young children. There's an assumption that they're predatory. they're going to do harm to those children. I think that it really works out that way. Also, there was a study done recently that shows that when men are in charge of hiring, they are more likely to hire women than other men if if everything else is equal. And so it's based on merit, but if it comes down to the wire and they have to decide between a man and a woman, a man is actually like slightly more likely to give the job to a woman. And on the other hand, when women are in charge of hiring, they almost always hire a woman. Like women tend, and I don't mean feminists, I mean women who are hiring. When women are hiring for positions, they have a bias towards their own gender. Now, we could talk about where that comes from. That's not important. But my point is that over time, let's assume that this is organic and it has nothing to do with feminism, although I doubt that. Because I imagine that if women are in charge of hiring, say, at schools or daycare centers, they hire more women, it's probably because they themselves, if they got a degree in education, were given a feminist education, and therefore they had a bias towards women. Like they felt like they had to make change, and so they need to give women more jobs, and they're not, because they can't see the bigger picture, they just keep doing that. So I think that when this guy, the incel guy, brought up, that there are some jobs that men have a much harder time getting because they're men, he should put it in the framework of, because there is an assumption that men, especially in early education and other places where you're going to be working with kids, there is a fear that those men are taking a job so that they can prey on those kids. So.
Okay.
All right, let's move on.
So I would say, it's a lot easier for a woman to find a relationship, even if she, says it's finding the right guy is so hard. It really isn't. But sometimes for a lot of guys, finding a girl at all is hard.
Okay, so he also puts it in the dating perspective because he's an incel, and that's sort of like
where was Kursat's response?
They didn't put one in. I'm sure that he had a really good one, but they didn't put it in.
Well, I'm just sort of noticing. I don't know if it's your selective, like the hot takes that you're choosing.
No, he doesn't say much. I swear, when he speaks, with the exception of him debunking the wage gap early on, I put that clip in. I put every clip where he talks in, but he just doesn't get to talk much. Well, he did originally, but
yeah, but what? I'm sorry. This is not kosher. And also the incel, I wouldn't. Why is he representing men's? He's not even really. He doesn't even
No,
really come across
he's
as
not
an appropriate choice to represent anyone.
Yeah.
No offense.
He's convenient for the editing. He was probably juicy. And the funny thing is that these feminist women, they all have crazy shit to say, and they left some of it in. And but this incel guy is the one that like made the largest impression on the viewers based on the comments. So even when women are bad actors or they're being bullies, most people don't see it. They just see the incel guy, saying some stuff that's kind of out there, and the other two guys in the panel were like, dude, we don't agree with that. Like Kursat was really angry with that guy when this was over. But anyway, moving on. Yeah.
But okay, and let me guess, they're going to deny that men have anything to cry about.
Well, let's find out. Let's find out.
If I have to consider what I wear before stepping out the house.
Oh my God.
Oh God, Jesus Christ, could you not be a thug for a single goddamn second?
And that's another thing these guys should, they probably did. I guarantee you that they did bring up, well, let's talk about it for a second. Some of the disadvantages. Men are 97% of combat fatalities. Men pay 97% of alimony. Men take 94% of work suicides. They make up more than 94% of work of work suicides, and 93% of work fatalities, and 81% of all war deaths, and 84% of they lose custody in 84% of divorces, 80% of all suicides are men, 77% of homicide victims are men, 89% of men will be a victim of at least one violent crime. Men are over twice as victimized by strangers as women. Men are 165% more likely to be convicted than women. Men get 63% longer sentences than women for the same crime. Court bias against men is at least 6 times bigger than racial bias. So yeah, it's got way more to do with being a man than it does being black. Males are discriminated against in school and university. Boys face vastly more corporal punishment than girls. 60 to 80% of the homeless are men. Women's cancers, they get 15 times more funding than men. At least 10% of fathers are victims of paternity fraud. 1/3 of all fathers in the U.S. have lost custody of their children. Most are expected to pay for this. 40 to 70% of domestic violence is against men. However, less than 1% of domestic violence shelter spaces are for men. Men pay over 70% of the income tax, but the vast majority of public spending is on services for women. There is more money spent on breast cancer than lung cancer and prostate cancer combined, despite the fact that lung cancer alone has 3 to 4 times more fatalities than breast cancer. And we can keep going. But there are definitely issues that I wouldn't be surprised if Kursat brought up, but it just didn't make it into the cut. I'd have to listen to the full 2-hour thing just to confirm, though. So
okay, so this is was the question about workplace, or did these two people?
No.
Okay.
He just the question, the statement was women have more advantages than men. And
well, yeah, certainly.
And the guy, yeah, obviously. Well, they always have, though. It's not even like, I think it starts by saying today women have it better than men, essentially.
Well, let's put it this way. Society in its day-to-day running requires men to die.
Mm-hmm.
Period. It requires men to die. And significantly more men than women. And in fact, if it required women to die, we would never have had society. So when you're looking at a system that requires men to die to operate and saying, oh, that's of benefit to men, but not women, on its face, it's a ridiculous assertion. It requires men to die, ladies.
Yeah.
Your handbags, your sewer system, flushing your shit down the toilet, making sure that when you pass out drunk in a party and you get raped by a predator who's probably looking for just that situation, making sure that you have justice, requires policemen who also die, and there is a toll of death for the society that you live in, ladies, and it's more expensive for men proportionately in the first world versus the third world, which is usually because poor people have to pay more to get less. But when you're looking at a society that has a death toll in men to operate, which is our society, and then you say, well, society benefits men over women, on its face, that is an absurd assertion. I just want you to think about that we think that men dying is a free action. It's like a gimme. It's a morality gimme. So we don't have to judge society by how many men it kills in its operation. That's just a gimme. That's just like, yeah, that's just we don't have to worry about that. This is not concerned. We don't need to put that in our morality equation or who society benefits equation. That's just a gimme. That's just like talking is a free action, killing men is a free action. So we didn't need to consider it. But it is the reality that our society requires men to die, to run. And these women do not even think about that. Ever.
Well, they don't have to. All right, let's keep going.
Draw some type of attention. I don't know how many other men have to consider, is this outfit going to be deemed safe for me? Any situation that I have experienced where I physically felt endangered simply because I don't want to give my number out. It's part of that.
Stop thugging, please.
I know, it just keeps going. And it's funny, they leave in so much of what she's saying. But I'm fairly certain that at least Christoff could have been able to say, well,
I'm a victim.
Men are far more likely to be victims of violent crime than women are, like just far and away. I already said that stat, so
And also, I can disabuse her of this notion. What you wear doesn't make you more likely to be raped. But getting drunk does. Like getting blackout drunk at a party does. You could wear a tiny little mini skirt and fuck me heels, and it doesn't affect the likelihood of you being raped. So you don't need to worry about that. But what you do need to worry about is not getting plastered.
Yeah.
And it's not because all men are rapists. It's because there is a very small group, very small percentage of very damaged men and women who will regard a passed out person at the party as fair game. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And nobody can stop them. Nobody can stop them. The only person who can prevent themselves from becoming a victim, and this includes men, and I know there's a lot of guys who are like, Shaw, we can't become victims of this, but there are men who have had this happen to them and have discovered that no, actually, rape is really awful. Even when it happens to me as a man.
Even still, like, she's just talking about what how she feels, and that's just not
her feelings are not based on reality.
No, they're not. She just says, I feel like I needed to be careful about what I wear. I feel afraid. So what? We can't do anything about that. I'm sorry, you know?
Yeah, and if you're, and this is what's astounding too. How come you say you don't need his protection and you're constantly appealing to it by being a victim? Like,
because she wants it when she wants it, but she doesn't need it. Because it's irrational. Okay, I got some super chats. We should move on because I know that you got to go in like less than a half an hour or so, and I want to get to some of the good stuff. Centrist Glass Cannon gives us $5 and says, I had to think about it a moment when you referenced the Pon farr music, which reminded me how the postmodernists don't like Vulcans for some reason. Okay, Ciara Flora. Yeah. Ciara Flora gives us $5. Well, because they're all about logic, I guess. And Ciara Flora gives us 5 and says, my hubby and I both work dangerous jobs. I remember every day to say I love you before we start our shifts. Well, isn't that sweet?
Yes. And thank you for working a dangerous job. I'm not saying that society doesn't also include some female deaths, but the proportion of male deaths is unbelievably higher. And if we reversed it, everybody would call society to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Continuing.
For men, you're not entitled a conversation with me. You're not entitled to my number.
That aside,
what the fuck?
She was just finishing her statement about how guys make her feel unsafe when they ask for her number, and then she goes on to say men shouldn't feel entitled to her number. Guys, if you ever see this woman, don't ask for her number.
Yeah, but also don't be sad. Like, when she denies you,
don't have opinions or feelings or anything. But also express them on her terms.
Yeah. What? Like, and this other woman's like, well, you know, touch and relationships are part of what keep people alive. But don't be sad when this woman denies you them, because that would be entitlement, and you should be dehumanized for feeling entitled to her body. Okay.
All right.
Are you going to make one example of the entitlement of men when it comes to asking for your number be the all-encompassing thing that all men have a problem when it comes to approaching women?
Well, firstly, it's not just an example. It's not necessarily all men. I don't dislike men. I love sports, I play video games. I have bros, I hang out with dudes. We just want men to realize that if you have friends that are having locker room talk, as a man, as an ally, please say something to your friends.
Okay,
what the fuck is this shit?
She wants to control men's speech, but before we say that, she says that she has male friends and bros and she likes to hang out with. I wonder, and I'm just gonna put it out there. I know this is, you know, not related to what this is supposed to be about, the debate itself, but how many of those guys are just orbiters that are hoping to get a chance with her? I'm just saying, I'm guessing that that's probably a good number. And I'm not saying that men and women can't be friends, because Alison and I are friends, right? But when we also, you know, that's totally plausible.
Awkward.
But
no, you're my friend.
Okay, thanks. But I think in her case, I bet that she surrounds herself with men, or she has men around her that she, I bet there's a good number of them that want more. And she probably wouldn't like to actually admit that, but I'm sure it's the case. Especially if they're feminist allies, which I bet she insists that the men in her life be feminist allies. I bet they're orbiters. Because that's what I've noticed with male feminists, is that a lot of times they are men that think that behaving like an ally to feminists is what appeals to women. And so they do that. So,
all right, first of all, what the hell does this all have to do with men's rights?
well, we're getting to that, I think, but not much. The dating thing is not relevant, but the feminists, they love this because it actually reinforces their arguments, right? Because this is the stuff that they talk about. It's not about men's issues. This has been all about feminist delusion.
It's starting to feel like this whole setup is, well, men should have rights, and then the feminist response is, but we control your identity. The end. So, if your identity revolves around us, you can't actually have any legitimate vulnerabilities, because then you become you delegitimize your identity. You see what I mean? If your identity is of service to women, and that's what toxic masculinity really means, your identity is of service to women and should revolve around their needs. When you have needs, you have just denied your own identity. And in denying your own identity, you have made yourself worthless.
Yeah.
And it's like, it starts starting to feel like this is really just about saying to men, you have no right to rights.
Also, this is a contradiction, because she says that she loves men and that she has male friends, but she thinks that men need to change. They need to talk a certain way. They need to, they're not allowed to use locker room talk, right? So she's trying to control their behavior. But she also claims that she loves men. She doesn't like them as they are. That means that it's conditional. So that means she doesn't actually like them. Well,
she likes men whose identities she controls.
Yeah, she likes men that do what she says they have to do. Then she calls them men if they behave that way. Like if a man strongly resisted and rebelled against her control, she would try to take away his identity and say he is not a man.
Okay. All right. So it's
moving
interesting.
on.
So essentially what she means by men are people who do what I want. Well,
That's pretty
everybody
much
loves
right,
those people, but we usually use different words for them. Okay. There we go.
Okay. Moving on.
Do you think repressing that is really the solution here, though?
He's talking about men, engaging in locker room talk, like whatever, like dudes being dudes with each other. Okay. He's saying, well, should we be repressing that? It's a good point, because if you're saying that men should be able to be in touch with their feelings and talk about what they really believe, then you can't also go back and say, but don't engage in locker room talk, even though women also have locker room talk. But hey, whatever,
Yeah, men should express everything, but only the things that I approve of, and don't repress the things that I don't approve of. They should simply not have them.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
If it's in a healthy male space,
I don't think that's healthy. I think it's
no,
toxic in itself.
I mean, if you're making jokes and you're doing all of that.
Jokes that are harmful jokes are not healthy, because they just lead to people normalizing.
You guys don't get the right. You don't get the right to start talking about toxicity. All you've done is be a bunch of thugs dehumanizing the other individuals in this panel.
Yep.
Seriously.
It's just a joke.
I'm pretty sure locker room jokes didn't end up getting people, large amounts of people killed, but dehumanizing people does. And I don't think, for the most part, I'm pretty sure that locker room talk isn't dehumanizing. And you know why I say that? Because human sexuality isn't actually objectifying. It's subjectifying. It is so tied with our theory of mind that it is impossible to really feel sexual desire for a person as a human being without humanizing them and recognizing their mind as separate from yours. Rapists literally have totally and utterly fucked up brains. Yep. Because they are retarded in certain aspects. And I mean that in the clinical sense of the term. They are retarded in certain aspects of their mental cognition. because they are not responding correctly like a normal human being to sexual stimuli. Human beings respond. Like our sexuality is so unique and so marvelous and so interesting. We respond to our perception of other people's perception of us sexually. So we respond to the feeling of being desirable. So our entire sexual response is tied into our very, very advanced theory of mind. There is no such thing as sexual objectification outside of rapists and ducks. There is only sexual subjectification among humans. So when you say that men are engaging in locker room talk, by definition, they are actually encouraging sexual subjectification of women, encouraging the recognition of their of consent and desirability through consent. Okay, that's what's happening. You may find it rude because you do not control it. Now, what you are doing, on the other hand, madam, during this thuggery, this battle to the death, is dehumanizing the men around you. You are actually taking away our perception of their humanity. That is toxic.
It's almost like they always project. All right, moving on.
Normalizing things. People always say, oh, it's just a joke, but when someone else hears it, they don't realize how that resonates, and again, how that turns into violence. Like, this is not an isolated situation. I'm only thinking of 3 off the top of my head, because if I think of too many, I'm gonna spiral
So
right now.
what's the alternative?
Oh my God, you're going to be a victim of your own thoughts, aren't you?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. No, it happens later. She loses it. I can't wait. I'm excited. But he says, what's the alternative then? Like, if men can't engage in whatever private conversations that they want on their own, then what do you suggest, you know?
And talk about these things.
No, I think men can have a healthy dialogue. I don't think men have to be toxic in order to have a conversation. I know plenty of men that are able to have conversations about healthy, productive things, just like women are.
Well, it's
dehumanizing.
She
like,
also,
really, that's all they're doing.
It's
just dehumanizing.
Do you really know what your male friends are talking about when you're not around, though? I mean, I think that she's deluding herself if she believes that she can really control men to that extent. And yes, I include male feminists because I know that those guys can be just as, rude and uncouth in their own private conversations. Because I've been friends with male feminists in my life. I've known them and I know how they are, and they're not that much different. They just hide it when women are around. So it's just
But really, okay, but that's even acknowledging the validity of her point here.
Yeah.
She's literally engaging in dehumanizing toxic behavior as she calls out men for theoretical behavior that doesn't even really exist. Like it's I mean, no matter how rude men are sexually, recognizing that women are sexual beings is sexual subjectification. Recognizing that women are sexually desirable results in sexual subjectification in normal men, because the normal male sexual response, just like the normal female to a degree, the normal female sexual response is that what you want is to elicit desire in women you find desirable. So even just talking about how women are desirable, you're just going through that. You're encouraging that process. So it's like it's not possible to objectify women, to dehumanize them sexually for a normal, healthy man. And to say that it is possible is itself dehumanizing to men.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? You shouldn't even give this the fucking validity that they have the right to talk about toxicity. I mean, they're essentially punching people in the. They're going and they're like shivving these guys. They're just punching them in the face, and then they're talking about how these men should avoid being violent. It's like, well, they're not the ones being violent here, ladies. You are. They're not the ones being toxic here. You are. They're not the ones dehumanizing. You are. Thugs.
All right, next super chat. Tyler Preston gives us $5 and says, I want to point out that the black woman, that's the woman who was talking just now, has the biggest ego out of the group. She thinks that all men want to violate her the moment that they see her. Ciara Flora gives us $5 and says, feminist, FEMINIST, foolish entitled mammals integrating nations into subjective totalitarianism. It's pretty good.
that's sort of amusing.
Yeah.
It's like
Okay.
women are.
Let's keep going.
Well, it's not obviously something that I have personal experience with, but only 1% of all people on the death row are women in this country. So when women and men commit identical crimes, women are much more likely to, for example, escape the death penalty. And that's just plain sex-based discrimination.
That I agree on.
So he brings up an actual men's rights talking point. 12 minutes and 48 seconds in.
Oh, geez, finally, this has actually been men's rights. Like, this is 12 minutes. You're right, 12 minutes and 48 seconds. We finally get a bit of men's rights on the.
And they have to agree.
Advertising.
They have to agree. They
and the feminists agree.
Yep.
Why couldn't we build on that?
Yeah. But wait, there's more.
Basic needs, like around the globe, the women who don't even have like proper like sanitary like products.
I like how he's like, I was just talking about men who get the death penalty, and you're countering with tampons. That's...
Also, women throughout history have managed to deal with menstruation without modern inventions like tampons.
Using tampons is actually appropriation of men's inventions. If you really want to fight the patriarchy, you should stop using tampons anyway. Free bleed, bitches!
Or use gravel and dirt.
Yeah.
Just pack it in there. Okay.
Well, anyway, I'm sure that feminist thought, checkmate, bitch. Yeah, you have the death penalty, but we got tampons. And more. Hold on.
I mean, I have to agree. Just small things like a tax on a box of tampons. Do you think I choose to do this monthly? No, trust me. So why should I have to pay taxes when this is a medical necessity?
Tax?
She doesn't want to pay taxes on tampons, Allison.
But everything is
She doesn't want to pay for tampons at all. I think she thinks she probably thinks it's a human right. I bet Bernie Sanders was like, tampons are a human right. But
why should he have to pay for male underwear? Like, what?
Oh, well, I mean, because if he's not, he's literally just like one thin layer of fabric away from raping a woman. So he needs to put on some underwear to like create more walls.
No, but there is all kinds of things that men have to buy that is exclusive to men. And like, why would this thing that's exclusive to women be necessary to leave untaxed? And it is a really small thing, considering that you pay significantly less tax overall than men and get significantly more in terms of your, and let's face it, it's not really you paying the tax, it's probably your boyfriend. Come on.
Death penalty.
Come on.
Tampons.
Tampon tax.
Tampon tax on top of that. Boom. Tampons in distant countries that are probably not really worried about tampons because they got bigger fish to fry, and tampon taxes here in the United States. The patriarchal US. God damn it.
I really wonder if women in these poorer countries are actually more concerned about tampon tax or the fact that their societies require men to die in order to run. Because I think if you ask them, they might say things like, maybe it's more important that we reduce the rate that my fathers and brothers and sons die. You know, they might be a little bit more concerned with that.
Yeah.
In fact, I know for a fact that at least in Afghanistan, there were women who were actually pointing that out and being like, well, you know, these initiatives for us are fine, but don't forget the men. And I find it unbelievable. It's like women in incredibly poor, war-torn regions can actually say something like, but what about men? They are dealing with a hell of a lot more than these women.
Yeah.
Like a hell of a lot more. And everybody in their society is dealing with, and they can still be concerned about men. And these three women apparently cannot. It's impossible. Well, but she did agree about the death, but then
she did. But then when the other woman brought up the tampon, she also agreed with that just as much, and then added to it by bringing up the tampon tax. So I think she's like, she had to give the death penalty a yes, because there's really nothing else. Like, what could you possibly say about that? Well, what they could have said is they could have brought the race card into it. I'm surprised they didn't. But maybe she didn't think of it, because a lot of feminists do that. They'll say, oh, no, that's not because men. That's because black men. You know, so...
All right, you say that there's some more juicy stuff.
Yeah. There is. I know we're getting close to the end. This is pretty dense, but let's keep going.
But we're almost like halfway in here. How could we be close to the end?
Yeah, but like all the juicy stuff is in the middle, and then it starts to kind of like fall apart towards the end. So, like there isn't that much at the tail end.
Like dismissed. A lot of our symptoms, a lot of the things we report, especially women of color, but women across the board, are just treated a lot less equally.
Okay, I'm gonna jump to, well, let Zach do his thing.
Wait. Okay.
What?
That just seemed like there was missing some context. So women are across the board, their symptoms are dismissed, and they're treated a lot worse. Where? You mean in
She didn't say.
Like what?
She probably just means everywhere.
What the hell is this? Like,
women always have it worse. We know that.
It's like she just sits in the chair and says, "Well, but women are they're just." No context, not context in what exactly they're being affected by, but women are just more affected by things and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And that is a counter argument to death penalty. Okay. All right.
I'd say that I'm an advocate for what I believe the role that men play in society. I believe that their views should be expressed openly, that they should be given a platform to do so, and I believed in men unapologetically and unashamedly being men as we were created.
What?
Oh my God! No, you can't be that. No, you can't have control over your own gender identity. Men's gender identity is controlled by women. The end. Yeah,
that's it. You're not allowed to. Well, that's kind of what this whole thing is about, right? All right, let's play the next bit. So this was Zach. Now let's hear this woman. I don't even know her name.
I think in my heart that there are things that men are entitled to.
Yeah, that she feels it. That's all we need. We don't need data. Why is there even a gender studies course? It could just be a feels course, or not even a well, you still make money.
It doesn't even have to. You don't have to study these so-called oppressions. All you have to do is sit in a chair and say, "I feel women are they're disadvantaged by stuff and things, stuff and things."
Yeah.
Brian, the stuff and things.
I don't know anything about the stuff and things, and I'm also not expressing any emotions on them, unless, of course, you decide that I should express emotions on them, in which case I will do my best to do so. But otherwise, I will just remain an ally. I hope I'm doing that right.
I think so. Am I doing it right, feminist? I'm a victim of stuff and things.
That's pretty much all you gotta do.
Things, they're just so horrible. They cause me the emotions and things and the stuff and things. Okay.
Okay.
All about human rights, and I do consider the rights of every human, but
Okay, so she says, I do consider the rights of every human. I think of just this. This is all about human rights. But
yeah, okay, here's the thing, my dear, madam. When you say something and then you follow it up with a but, you can completely ignore everything you said prior to the but. Because you're now going to say
you're about to undo the entire but, the entire previous statement. Because but she's basically saying only when it comes to what you think about my thoughts on human rights, listen to everything before the but. However,
every time I hear of a men's rights activist, I hear anger and I hear very illogical reasoning, and it just boils my blood because it's a setback for all of us.
So when men's rights activists speak, she hears anger, which makes her blood boil. But that doesn't mean that she's the one that's angry. And by the way, you can see that woman in particular is seething underneath. I've seen lots of debates with progressives and intersectional feminists where they are, you know, they have a thesaurus at the ready. They know how to talk about make their arguments, and even though they remain to a degree polite, you can see that they have so much hatred inside of them. And it doesn't come out overtly, but it's definitely there under the surface.
Okay, well, here's the thing. If people have issues and those issues are not being addressed, they are going to be angry.
Yep.
Okay? You cannot expect men's rights activists to be dealing with issues that remain unaddressed and not be angry. So, suck it up. Illogical? Really?
Yeah, right. All right, well, speaking of, here's one of the good parts. Let's keep going.
I feel that the other side does not understand my values.
Oh my God.
I think a lot of times when a movement is created, the other side thinks that they're being attacked or think that it's some like attempt at erasure. That's not what feminism is about at all. What do you need a whole men's rights activism movement for?
Wait. So wait a minute. Again, in the space of 2 sentences.
Oh my God, you're okay. This okay. All right. Okay.
Movements should be allowed to exist, and especially, like, I think that people should listen to each other's problems. But why do you have a movement? Why? Just let us do
listen
it.
to this again. I want to listen to this again because
all right. We'll go
my
back.
brain might have sorted out over this one.
Okay.
Times when a movement is created, the other side thinks that they're being attacked or think that it's some like attempt at erasure. That's not what feminism is about at all. What do you need a whole men's rights activism movement for? I'm so
Okay, wait. Are you sure Jubilee is on their side?
Look at him biting his tongue. No, I mean I think that Jubilee. No, they're absolutely feminists. And I think that they legitimately do not see what they have basically left out there. They don't see it.
Because I want that clip. Because it just encapsulates feminism.
Yeah.
When a movement is created, the other side wants to erase it. Why do you need a men's rights movement? Jesus Christ. What? How do you do that? That's amazing. It must be because she thinks in her heart.
Yeah.
Oh man. But you know, we're the illogical ones here.
Yes, the men's rights movement is really
when a movement is created, the other side wants to erase it. Why do you need a men's rights movement?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Okay, let's.
All right, but that's no, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
It is. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
All right, let's keep going.
Well, I mean, like, I will advocate for positive masculinity and what men should represent and healthy outlets for men. Like, I still think the Boy Scouts should be exclusively the Boy Scouts, for example, one of those things. Where I would like to think that we could get some common ground is when it comes to the clear biases that are in the court system, especially in the marriage and family court system, right? And
another men's issue.
And right there is what I would advocate for when it comes to men's rights.
The things that stand valid, like that I'm hearing from y'all that are like valid to me, come from a place of like, I am treated like unfairly by the system, versus a lot of the things women are saying. It's also America and the system as well, but a lot of it is like harm from men.
How and where?
Okay, so this is where she snaps. So she says, a lot of what I'm hearing from men's rights activists is that she thinks are valid complaints are complaints about the system and the way the system treats men. But what feminists are talking about is not only the system, but also men as a group. And he asks her, he says, well, you know, how? This guy's been really, really polite. Like, all he's done is ask questions. He's actually trying to understand their position. He actually says, I'm trying to find common ground with you guys. Okay?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just want
what
to
do you
point
want to point
something
out? Mm-hmm.
All right, so she says that men, what she's been hearing is them complaining about the system. How can men's rights activists simultaneously be complaining about the system and blaming women? And I mean, she says that we are complaining about men, right? We're complaining about men. We're blaming men. We're, as feminists, we're complaining and blaming men. And you guys are just complaining about the system, which means I don't know, whatever. But then feminists think that men's rights activists are blaming women and complaining about women. So how does she square that circle?
She's not logical, Alison. She's really not.
Okay.
Albert Nada gives us $5 Canadian and says, "How can women have it worse? There are way more sex toys for women. There is a total sex toy gap favoring women." All right, so let's continue. So he asks her, because she says, you know, women have to worry about more than just the system. They have to worry about men. And he says, how? Okay.
How and where what?
Where's this harm from men coming from?
Okay, it started when I was young. I'm not going to talk too long. I was 16, got a bottle thrown at me because I told a boy no. It started when I was in a club. A boy touched me. I said no. He kept touching me. It got to the point he got violent. It gets to the point that the only reason why a man decided to stop touching me in the bookstore I talked about earlier is because he realized my husband was not too far away. And he said, sorry, bro. Never said sorry to me. That's why. And that's off the top of my head.
He was touching her?
This is why I get upset, because I'm like, I'm here to talk about like how you feel, but when you just dismiss the fact that women actually have experiences, that's when it seems like
how did they do that? What the fuck are you? Men deal with the death penalty more. You're dismissing my experiences of being sexually assaulted at parties. What? How the hell did that? This isn't. You know what? This is not worth engaging with, because he is bringing up a legitimate issue, a legitimate logical issue, and she is just punching him in the face, because that's what this is. This has nothing to do with actually finding common ground. It is just emotionally dominating someone through your tears and victimhood. That's all she's a freaking thug.
Yep.
And she knows how to do it.
Yeah.
She knows how to play the game. She can just silence any conversation about the issues that men face as a woman by simply playing the victim, and that is what she's doing. It has nothing to do with logic. It has nothing to do with finding common ground. It's all about emotional dominance. My God, this isn't a debate. It's a freaking free for all. Okay.
All right. So she's not done yet, I think.
It seems like it's about your ego, and that's where I get pissed off, because how dare you tell another human being that their experiences, what they're telling you right in front of your face, is not valid.
I didn't say they were invalid. I said how and why. I'm trying to understand.
How and why? Because it happened. It happened many times. It happened yesterday. It happened the day before.
Okay, I think some of the
He's like, what the fuck is going on? I just had a question. I'm just trying to understand. And I mean, like, and then of course, here's the thing that's funny is that she immediately jumps to the, this is why I don't do this, because when we're talking, you are dismissing my experience. He never said he didn't believe her, but she presumes that he is dismissing her, which makes me think that she may not be telling the truth about her experience. Also, because why would you say that if it was true? Like, why would you say that if you weren't lying? By immediately, it's like when you accuse someone of lying and they get angry at you, that only sort of further makes things look suspicious. If you think that they're being dishonest and they respond emotionally instead of like making their case. But he didn't even question her. He just wanted to understand her. Like, these guys are being absolutely polite and empathetic, and these women are just bullying the shit out of him. Okay, go ahead, Alison.
Well, yeah, because it works. Like, you know, I mean, he's like, why is this happening? It's because she can punch you in the face and get you to shut up. Like, what more logic do you need as a man? The woman has just pissed all over you as a show of dominance. Like, she's just basically just lifted her skirts and I'm in charge now. Look at all my pain. Like, seriously. What is the fuck? And It's just like when conversation degenerates to this point where it's just a display of dominance, there's no debate happening. There's no common ground happening. This is just a freaking slugfest.
It's a power
and the
struggle.
Guys,
yeah.
It's a power struggle. And the guys are like completely unequipped to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
They're completely unequipped to deal with what these women are doing to them. It's actually sort of disturbing to watch. It's like watching a bunch of grannies being curb stomped by MMA fighters. Can you imagine it? Like just totally and utterly annihilated. And the grannies are like, "Well, why are you doing this?" And they're like, "Well, because we can. It's because these women can. Because these women have the power to dominate you in this way."
Yeah.
So they do. There's no logic to it. There's no rationality. There's no fairness. There's no empathy. They have the ability to dominate you in this manner, men in this manner, and so they do. They don't want to listen to your concerns. They don't want to listen to your vulnerabilities because these are the tools that they use to dominate you. And if they were to listen to them in a fair and legitimate way, as opposed to, I don't know what the hell just happened there. Oh, men have to deal with being more likely to be criminally charged and put on the death. Well, you men are hurting me by touching me at parties. What the, how? That can only make sense as a dominance display in order to silence another person. Because otherwise it makes no sense. It doesn't even make sense in response to his question, because his question wasn't what happened to you specifically, but what is happening to women by men. And incidentally, women are doing their own fair share of excessive and aggressive touching and sexual impropriety. So this isn't just women having this done to them by men. It's also the other way around. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not brought up at all. I mean, I long for the day that some man watches a woman go off like that and says, you know, I've been sexually assaulted by women.
Yeah.
You know that? And just lays it out there. And just neutralizes this.
Yeah, that would have been the way to go. That's not like Christoff is very focused on just the issues. So I don't think he would engage in the emotional counter whatever this is, this melee. But yeah, that would be.
The problem is that as long as you don't deal with the melee, they will continue to dominate.
Mm-hmm.
Like the reason why Kathy Newman stopped in her tracks was because Jordan Peterson forced her to acknowledge his vulnerability. And suddenly she was like jarred out of whatever bullshit she was. The only way to stop these women is to fight the way they are fighting it.
Yeah.
And it is to do exactly what they say they want men to do, but don't actually want them to do. It is to point blank say, okay, so are you responsible for my babysitter raping me when I was 12? Are you responsible for my female teacher getting me drunk and taking my virginity when I was 14? Are you responsible for this, lady? Are you responsible for that? Do I get to blame women for that? And start reestablishing emotional dominance. And I know this is like really difficult for men to do. It's really difficult for men to do because they are taught that their needs and vulnerabilities are in direct opposition with their identity. So they have to face an existential terror of losing their sense of self in order to recognize them. It takes an incredible act of courage for a man to recognize his vulnerabilities and express them. And they are banking on that. They are banking on their ability to dominate men's identities in order to silence them. These women are thugs. I look up to none of them. And if feminism is never going to convince me that it is a legitimate movement, if this is what it creates.
Okay, so I got a couple more super chats, and then we're gonna get through the rest of this final take, and then we can quit. So Albert Nada version 2.0 gives us $5 Canadian, and he says, I'd love to sit down with her. She wouldn't know what hit her. I would come back her with the "you're the one being dismissive," bam, Albert smash. And Emery Kalami gives us $2 and says, I got upset, so you have no rights and shut up. Okay, so let's continue.
Some of the things that you guys are touching on, such as the court system and gender roles, are a subject of patriarchy, and that's part of what women are trying to dismantle, is those traditional gender roles.
Are there any feminist organizations that have done anything, for example, to challenge bias against men and fathers in the family court system?
Absolutely.
Can you please give me like a list of feminist advocacy organizations that have engaged in any meaningful advocacy to address those issues? Because there are actually none.
Okay. I know that you came with your little research or whatever. I didn't come with a list of like feminist organizations, but I know.
You know, for people who are for women who are playing the victim, that's certainly a snide little thing to say.
Based. That was based. Let's hear it again, because he had to get it in. It was the only, they wouldn't let him talk, and he didn't get to say anything, so he just hit them with it. And because she tried to blame it all on patriarchy. All of your issues, those are men's fault.
That's part of what women are trying to dismantle, is those traditional gender roles.
Are there any feminist organizations that have done anything, for example, to challenge bias against men and fathers in the family court system?
Absolutely.
Can you please give me like a list of feminist advocacy organizations that have engaged in any meaningful advocacy to address those issues? Because
there are none.
Okay. I know that you came with your little research or whatever. I didn't come with a list of like feminist organizations, but I know actively that there are women's organizations that are trying to dismantle those inequalities.
Just one name, just one
Again,
organization.
I didn't come with a list, my dude.
There are no such organizations.
They don't exist. Got
They
him!
don't. And certainly they don't exist to the number of the feminist organizations who are trying to maintain those biases. Like seriously, I can list organizations like I know Judy, I think Judy Bindel is part of one that want to actually maintain and enhance the bias for female criminals.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can list them. But can you list any feminist organizations that are actively challenging the bias against male criminals? No. Certainly they're not in any position, or they're not as active, shall we say, as the ones that want to maintain the bias for female criminals. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's finish this, Brian.
All that's left is there's like one more. I'm gonna let Kursat do his thing, and then we're gonna do one more, which I think is actually pretty interesting too, and then we're done.
I think there has been significant progress over the last decade or so, especially in the legal field, but I think there are still significant disparities that need to be addressed, such as poor health conditions, bias against men in the criminal justice system, bias against men in family courts, and bias against men in the educational system, especially in colleges.
All right. I think that let me ask, what is this question?
Women should be allies.
All right, they all believe that, but I want to go and jump to 1851, where this guy asks a question. It's Zach, and let's play this. This will be the last clip.
Agree on.
Can I ask one question? What would you envision would be the ideal man with the end goal of feminism, as far as educating men or working to dismantle whatever patriarchy is? Like, what does that man look like?
It starts with childhood. We have to teach children as well as girls, because we're also taught, because of toxic masculinity, what a man should be as well.
I think that we just need to hold men accountable. In order to kind of make progress, we need help from people that will listen.
I thought she said she didn't need his help. I thought that she could take care of herself just fine and didn't need anybody to she's well, but we know. Right?
Because
we know.
Let's be real, when we express our concerns, a lot of men refuse to listen, but they would be more likely to listen to another man.
Do you also feel like you have an ethical obligation to challenge other women or other feminists when, for example, they deny that men face discrimination?
When it comes to things like, oh, men can't be abused. I've had this conversation with another woman, and it's the idea that just because a man may be physically stronger than us, does that mean they cannot be abused? And because of that, again, fairness. Women need to be held accountable as well.
That's what I mean by her being like something that's close-ish to an equity feminist because of that, but she still is carrying an extremely toxic set of ideas. But what the scariest part of that clip, that and the reason why I did it, was when the Asian guy said, "What does the ideal man look like?" Now, I think that the fact that he even has to ask that question should be extremely creepy, because he's basically saying, okay, it seems like you ladies don't like men as they are, but you want to remake them in whatever you believe they should be. What does that look like? And then the woman says, it starts when they're young. So this is just putting it out there. They're just telling you right up front, this is what feminists want to do. They want to re-engineer people in the way that they think they should be. And this isn't... this is specifically men. I mean, they say, you know, women too, and I think that to a degree that's true, but I think it's mostly men that they're going after. So I thought that that was worth sharing.
It is creepy.
It's super creepy because, I mean, but it's not a surprise. I mean, they think that education lets them basically play God with the minds of children and make them into whatever they want. And they know it's true.
Yeah, that is creepy.
So,
well, okay, so my thoughts are, history is about controlling men's identities in order to do the work of society. How is this any different than anything else that's happened in history? Like, how is this, what they're doing, any different than what has always been done? Like, they're just doing it more and a little bit more destructively, or a lot more destructively, since their particular framing of gender dynamics is that men actively, or I don't know how you could say passively, that men construct society in order to benefit themselves at the expense of women. So they're presenting a particular way that men and women relate that actually dehumanizes both. And that's really destructive, but it's not really that different than anything else that's come before. Because in order for society to survive, it has to convince men to act in particular ways for its benefit, which means it has to control men's identity. And this is what these women are doing. They're controlling men's identity. It's unfortunate that they're controlling men's identity in the context of a belief system that ultimately will deconstruct society, or at least weaken it to the point where other crises will cause it to collapse. But, you know, they're just doing the same thing. And I've come to realize that there is no point asking for reason in all of this, because the reason is not in the mouth noises that they're making. The reason is in the effects that they have. And the effects that these women have had is to bully these men into agreeing, at least in theory, with the idea that they need to be some kind of ideal man for them and change themselves for them, to bully the recognition of men's issues. So, in other words, that one woman, in the face of being told about the issue with the death penalty, basically flinging herself at him like a spider monkey, trying to scratch his eyes out with all that that basically irrelevant stuff about how she's a victim. It's just establishing dominance so she doesn't have to deal with his vulnerability or with men's vulnerability. She's essentially just getting rid of the thing that she doesn't want to look at. And in doing so, she's dominating those men using her vulnerability and her victimhood. And it's like, that was the effect of that. She didn't want to have to listen to a legitimate issue that men might face. Therefore, she just screamed at it. She made mouth noises at it till it went away. You know, and that's the point. There's no point looking at these people and what they say and trying to find the logic or reason, or even any common ground. Sorry, Jubilee, there's no real common ground to be found with somebody who, in response to me saying something, will just punch me in the face and shit on my head. And this is what these women are doing. In response to these men saying we have issues, they're punching them in the face and shitting on them. They're essentially using thug tactics, emotional thuggery, to silence them, except for the one woman who admitted that they had an issue. I mean, the one you called an equity feminist, you might actually be able to get to her and say, all right, lady, put down the gun and let's have a real conversation. Because that's really what's going on. Jubilee has set up a situation where one side is completely unarmed, the other side has a gun, and they said, let's find common ground. Well, there's no common ground to be found. One side's armed. The only common ground to be found is the other side will do as they are told. And that's not real common ground. So this is nonsense. That's my final analysis.
All right.
If women really want to find common ground with men, they have to put away the guns. They have to put away the accusations of malfeasance. They have to put away the dehumanizing language. They have to put away the thuggery with this whole, oh, I'm such a victim of this person, and all of my feelings are being hurt by every word that he speaks. You have to put away all of the attempts at manipulation, domination, aggression, and threat narrative creating threat narratives. You got to put away all of the weapons, ladies, and you have to actually listen to men. Can you do it? That's real common ground.
All right, so I'm going to give Christoff the last word in the video, and then we're going to close it out.
We're in a fallen state, right?
There is a change of guard, not necessarily a change of guard, but things are evolving, things are changing. And I feel like a lot of men speak from a viewpoint almost of fear. A lot of men are having a hard time grasping that and feeling comfortable with it.
I do feel empathy for your personal experience, but I cannot sympathize with your ideological position, because that ideological position is built on a fallacy, and that fallacy is actually causing very real consequences for men as a class in this country. So I understand that you are here with us as kind of the good feminist, so to speak, that you feel empathy for men, and I believe you, but I do not believe your movement, and I do not believe your ideology.
All right, we'll leave it at that. That's a wrap, guys.
Well, I wouldn't even say that they're necessarily the good feminists. I'm going to tell you, there is one test to whether or not a woman is a quote-unquote good feminist, or even a good woman. Will she put the gun down? Will she actually relate to a man as a fellow human being? Or does she always need the gun of victimhood aimed at his head?
All right. Yeah, I agree. I think that he was giving them the benefit of the doubt. But then again, the conversation was a lot longer, so maybe things became less hostile over time. It's hard to say because of their editing. But if you guys want, I can include the full-length 2-hour video. It's on Kursat Peckgoz's YouTube channel. The audio quality is very bad because he brought, like, I think it was like a camera or like his phone, and he was trying to record the conversation, in a discreet way. And so, you can't hear it that well, but he did put like some timestamps so you can hear some specific arguments. But it is very long. I'll put it in the description so you guys can listen to the full context. I will have Christoff on the show this Friday to talk about this, sort of a retrospective. So, be sure to tune in on that. And I think that this was, it was fun. It went a little bit long, like, usual. So I'm going to wrap it up so I can go eat and Alison go home. Actually, you're already home, aren't you?
Yes.
You just want to go back to playing Beat Saber or something. Okay.
I'm in my lair beneath the volcano.
Well, if you guys could, please hit that like button if you haven't already. And please be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications, because you never know, you might actually get notified when our shows go live. And leave us a comment in the down below and let us know what you think about this conversation. Did you guys catch all the things that we pointed out? Have you already seen this? What do you think about the comments? How did Christoff do, considering what he had to deal with? Because, I mean, in a way, not only was he fighting against feminists, but he was fighting against some of the people on his own side who were just ill-equipped and ill-qualified to even have this conversation. So with that said, I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks, guys, for coming on this episode of HBR Debate, and we will talk to you guys in the next one.